Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. Nee. I've got no rhythm. Today I've got two books to talk about for March Mystery Madness. Both of them mysteries, maybe a little bit of madness, both of which I've read in March, and both part of a fairly significant series. The first one that I'm going to talk about is part of a series of, I think, 18 novels. Written between the sort of early 1950s and 1970s, and this is the second of the series. And I'm talking about, this is The Drowning Pool by Ross Macdonald featuring Lou Archer. This is the second one. I've got this gorgeous, I mean, look at that. Absolutely gorgeous cover, movie tie-in cover with Paul Newman from the movie The Drowning Pool, which was the second in the movie series. The first was called Harper. So Lou Archer in the book was renamed Harper for the series, and I think the first movie is called Harper, and then this is the sequel, The Drowning Pool. And the first book, the movie Harper, was based, I believe, on the first book in the series, The Moving Target by Ross Macdonald, which I have in a slightly less gorgeous. So this is Fontana. This is a British edition from originally published. So the book, the second book, is originally published in 1950. This is a UK edition published by Fontana, originally in 1972. This is the sixth impression from November 1977. This was copyrighted in 1950, and this is the first book. This is a Bantam, sort of uglier paperback edition. So this was the first book published in April 49, and this Bantam edition published in December 1970. Now, the interesting thing to me, not necessarily interesting about the books, is that so I just read the second in the series. I read the first in the series over 20 years ago. So this is pre-internet. I know exactly when and where I bought this, because I bought this in January 2001. So it's over 20 years ago. And if it's January 2001, I actually remember buying this book. It was in a half-price books in somewhere in Texas. I'm trying to remember. I think, was it Dallas? I might have been in Dallas, Fort Worth area. And I had discovered half-price books for the first time ever in half-price books, and I ended up going to 4 different half-price books, and this was pre-internet. So the way I found out there were 4 different half-price books, I would get to my hotel. I was on a business trip of some kind. I would get to my hotel, I would take out the yellow pages and do a search for bookshops, and found that I went to the first one, and then they had in the first one they had a list of all the other ones in the area, and I had a hired car. I had some time off in between meetings, and I drove from place to place. Now, the other reason why I remember I bought this in half-price books is this is 2001 I bought this book published in 1970, and the cover price here is 75 cents. And I remember very clearly buying this in a half-price books, and I took this to the counter with a bunch of other things, and they charged me 37.5 cents for it, which to me was just the most remarkable thing, because you got charged half the cover price. I don't know if this is still the case in half-price books. I don't know if someone still found a 75-cent paperback in half-price books anywhere, and they have several tens, at least dozens of franchises or chains around the US. I don't know if they still would charge half cover price for an old beaten up paperback, but I remember that's what I got charged for this, so I was really delighted with that. But I read this and found it a little sticky, a little heavy-handed, and didn't love it. So I come to Ross Macdonald having read Chandler, having read Hammett. I should do that. I haven't read Hammett, and I haven't read Chandler, even though I read Chandler first. Precursors to Ross Macdonald, which is a pseudonym, I believe, Kenneth Miller. I think I'm right. Miller with an A-A-R. I don't know if I'm remembering that correctly. And I came to this after Chandler, who I loved. Chandler was my first introduction to classic detective fiction of the first half of the 20th century. And I'm a big Chandler fan. I've read his fiction. I read The Simple Art of Murder, a big book of where he just talks about how detective stories need to work. I've read his letters. I'm sort of a Chandler fan, and I read a fair bit of Hammett as well, who's like really hard-boiled and just no mess, no fuss, and not as flowery necessarily as Chandler, but the real deal. And I came to Macdonald believing him to be sort of the next in line, and found it a little heavy going, a little sticky. So I didn't then pick up. So this is, I say, 20 years ago, and the time has gone by and I haven't gone back and read. And there's 18 in the series. I love a series. I love crime fiction. I love tracing a detective's path over time, and yet somehow I just put MacDonald aside and didn't read more. And then, whatever reason, last year I was looking for books and something to fit in between. I've been reading a lot of modern literary fiction, a lot of novels, and I always like to have something crimey in between. So I thought I'll go back and give MacDonald another try, because he is considered, maybe even a third leg, if slightly less a leg. Maybe the chair wobbles a little bit, the stool wobbles, but a third leg in that Chandler, Hammett, and MacDonald. I thought I'd better give him another try, and managed to find, I think, on eBay in the UK, this fantastic. I love this edition, and read this recently and had a better experience. Like, I think now I will go on. I'm not in a great rush, but I'm going to go on and read at least the next one. And the thing about Archer is he's a private detective. He's hired to find out what happened in a particular instance, and it's rich people and California and spoiled brats and marriages that don't really make sense and all the usual tropes, children who aren't really don't have any attention paid to them, all sorts of things going on here, and although it felt very tropey, of course this is probably the place those tropes come from, at least before this Chandler, that kind of sort of rich, lazy, corrupt milieu. And there's also a whole deal about oil as well, like so the rich people trying to get other people off the land, in the desert or whatever, all that kind of stuff going on. But I actually found this, more enjoyable, and it starts off fairly light and breezy as Archer goes off to investigate some regional theatre. So the wife is worried about the husband, and the husband is a sort of he's due to inherit, when his mother eventually passes away, he'll inherit all the money. He's kind of tied to her purse strings for now, and does this thing with regional theatre. So the first 50 pages or so, it's Chandler tracking down leads, going to watch him, going to see a rehearsal, and you think it's going to be sort of light and breezy, and then just gets really quite dark and violent and ugly, and some traditional sort of noirish tropes of I don't want to give too many spoilers, but children who are fathered by people other than the father they've always known, some hints at incest, certainly homosexuality, or all these things that sort of powered crime in the 40s and 50s. So actually, got a bit of a kick out of this. I think it's a terrific thriller. I think there's a couple of set pieces which are bonkers, but the baddies are proper baddies. Archer gets beaten up a little bit. It's sort of like Marlowe. He's a big guy, but he's not really a fighter. He's more dogged and honourable than throwing fists and solving it that way with his physical presence. It's just about being there and believing in truth and honesty, and but also bearing witness to the terrible things that people do. I think that's also kind of a theme, that these characters, these noble knights, end up a lot of the time unable to change destiny and just bear witness to it. I think that's true in Chandler's case. I think that's true with the classic noir movies. Jake Gitters in Chinatown. Does he really solve anything, or he just watches the terrible things, man's inhumanity to man, etc., etc. Anyway, maybe a little too philosophical for a crime novel, but that's The Drowning Pool by Ross Macdonald, the second in the Luage series, and I may go ahead and read another one now. And then the next one I read is a much more recent project. I'm on the fourth in the series, and this was Georges Simenon's Kieran at KD Books. I tend to fall into that thing where I pronounce French things with a French accent, because it's the only sort of other accent that I've ever really learned. So this is The Hanged Man of Saint Folien, or Le Pendu de Saint Folien, I guess in French, if that's how it's done. Anyway, featuring Armand Maigret, Jules Maigret, Jules Maigret. And this is the fourth in the series, and I only started reading this, I'm trying to think when I bought the first one. Look at the date, I'll tell only last year. So, 2 years ago, 6/21 is when I started the first one. Peter the Latvian, and then I've read a couple since then, and this is the fourth in the series. And just to show you what I've done so far. So the first in the series was also this modern translation. Let's see who this was translated by. David Bellos, but a recent one. The second one was the translation from translation from 2013. So the book is originally from 1930. Simenon was writing these books, and there are 74, 78 of them, something like that, and a bunch of short stories starting in the 30s, and he was writing right up until early 70s. So 40 years and 70 books. So I've got a whole lot of these to get through, and I'm only on number 4. And this is a translation from 2013, and this one is also by a different translator. So this one was translated by Linda Coverdale, but also 2014, I beg your pardon. So clearly, Penguin has been reissuing these. They've got a cover price on them, I think, of £6, £6.99 when these came out 10 years ago now. So new translations, and that's the first one and the fourth one. But the second and the third one I read, I've got these gorgeous, fabulous. I wish my whole world was full of these green Penguin detective classics. So you may be familiar with this sort of orange Penguins of this era, which were for novels. Green was for detective fiction. I think there's blue for non-fiction or philosophy. And there's purple, and there's a couple of other sort of less well-known ones, but the green is so recognizable, and I love these. But these are much earlier translations, of course. So I've got Maigret Meets Milord. This book is also, I guess, from the 1930s, early 1930s, and this translation is copyright Robert Baldick in 1963, and this one is translation copyright Margaret Marshall in 1963. So 4 different translators, 2 from the 60s, 2 from the 2010s. And I will say at this stage, as much as I love these editions, and I love finding these, and I would love to be able to complete an entire set, as many of these as possible, I find these 1960s translations not as easy to read as the more recent translations. I've enjoyed all 4 of them in terms of the plot, in terms of understanding who Maigret is, in terms of following his actions more than his thought process. You don't get much interiority with Maigret. He's a man of action. Something happens, he sees it, he does something, rather than working out and coming to conclusions. And it's less about his interiority, although there is some bit. He is a fully, even at 4 books in, he is a fully realized and fascinating, and I think really, I'm really excited about spending the next 20 odd years working my way through the rest of these. But I do find these more recent translations a little more readable than the early ones, which just means that as I go looking for these, and I buy these secondhand, I rarely pay full price for these. I look for them on eBay, and normally I might hold out. I might have paid an extra £1. I'm very mean about what I spend on secondhand books, but I might have paid up. Like if I found the same book in 2 editions, one for £3 and one for £4, I might have paid £4 for this edition just because I love the way they look. But actually now, 4 books in, 2 of each, I think I would probably try and pick up the more recent translations just because I find them a little easy to read. That's just me, and that's the State Nation. But let's tell you a little bit about The Hangman of Symphonia. It is a mystery. It's and it's a mystery with a detective at its heart. Maigret is a detective in the French, whatever the French police forces of in the 1930s. But this is not a crime story per se. This is a story where Maigret, on his way back from some other meeting or some official case, sees something, and he sees something which makes him think something peculiar is happening, and follows a person, and sees him take a person who looks to have very little means, sort of a person who's fallen out of society. His suit is worn, and there's a lot of attention paid to the details of class, how he's dressed, what this means about a person, and the way they, the state of his shoes, and he sees this person send a rather large sum of money in cash to have it packaged up and posted to an address. he's carrying around a cardboard suitcase, which was the kind of thing that people had at the time, but not an indicator of this man's place in society. He goes off and ultimately checks himself into a hotel room. Well, Maigret follows him because he thinks there's something odd going on, and on the way buys a matching cardboard suitcase, and at some point, sitting opposite this man on a train who's followed for no reason. He has no case. There is no crime, no victim, no motivation to do so. But Maigret has watched this and thinks this something odd, and he needs it. And Maigret makes the fateful decision to switch his suitcase full of newspaper with the suitcase that the man is carrying, which seems to have some significance for him. The man checks himself into a hotel. Maigret checks himself into the same hotel. Ends up in an adjoining room. And through the keyhole between the rooms, Maigret watches this man open the suitcase, find that it is full of newspaper and not what he thought he was carrying, which Maigret has in his room with this separating door between them, sees the man go into the most horrific air of despair when he discovers that he does not have with him the suitcase he thought he did. And before Maigret can do anything, the man takes out a pistol and shoots himself in the head. The mystery at the heart of this is initiated by our hero. It might never have happened had Maigret not decided to insert himself into this story. And this is not a crime and punishment kind of thing that where Maigret feels terrible. This just drives Maigret to find out, who is this man? What happened? Why was he mailing a large packet of cash to somewhere else? And Maigret, of course, has memorized the address, and that will go and track that down. How has this man got to this point in life? And what's happened? And in 130 pages, Maigret doggedly tracks down every single last detail, uncovers a tragic backstory for this man and things that happened 10 years ago, and resolves, or the situation is resolved or not resolved. No spoilers for the ending, but several other people are involved. Maigret tracks them all down, gets them all in the same place, uncovers the whole story. Just a remarkable piece of sophisticated thriller. It's less about a crime, but it's a thriller. A man kills himself, and Maigret does not rest until he finds out why and how the man got to this point. Continue to be super impressed with the Maigret books. I'm still in the 30s, and he carried on writing up into the 70s. So it's going to take me 10 years at least before I get into the 60s, before I get somewhere anywhere near when I was even born. But if they are all as smartly written as I read this in a single sitting because I can, and because once you can, why wouldn't you? It's not, I won't remember 6 weeks from now who done it and why, but I have nothing but pleasure in whizzing through this an afternoon between one novel and another novel to know that there is something solid and psychologically insightful and still thrilling about good detective fiction from 100 years ago. And this was George Simenon's The Hanged Man of Saint-Folien, a really solid entry in the detective series. I'm 4 books in to 70 odd, so it's going to take me a while to purchase, buy, and read all these things, but I'm going to have fun doing it. And that's it. 2 books for March Mystery Madness, both sort of mid-20th century classics. I hope you enjoyed. Take care. Bye.